Hi everyone, this is Grace at gbmaltese, and I hope you're doing finer than frogs here today. As you can see, I have a lot more done on Ginger, and I think it's coming out great. When I pull this cover off, it's going to start blinking because of the shine on the drills. So, take a quick look. Let me see if I can do like this. That'll help a little bit. You can see the shine. She's looking really good. It's coming out nice. Okay, let me get the cover back on and get this situated where we're not having a blinking camera. That blinking drives me crazy. Now, as I'm working on this today, I'm going to be doing a true crime story. And I want to make a disclaimer right now before I get started. If you are sensitive to stories of murder, blood, and gore, you might want to skip this one. This one's a bit intense. If you have children in the room, either wear your headphones or listen to this at another time. It does involve a child, the murder of a child, back in 1867. And if you think that would bother you, you might not want to listen. I just think that I just wanted to remember this young lady, this young girl, not a lady, she was just a young girl who senselessly lost her life to someone, someone who would do that. Of course, they're insane. Most people who commit murders are insane or have temporary insanity, or they've just lost it due to emotions or whatever. Does that make it okay to do it? No. They do need to. There needs to be punishment, and we're going to talk about the story of Fanny Adams. This took place in England. And the date that it happened was August 24th, 1867. Now, the young girl, Fanny, was 8 years old. They said she was a very friendly girl. She was outgoing, bubbly personality, and she looked older than her age. So, maybe she might have looked, it doesn't say how old she might have looked, but maybe she would look 10 or 11, 12, but she looked older than her age. Well, it was a nice, warm, hot day in England, and Fanny and her sister Lizzie, who was 5, and their friend Minnie Warner went to go out to play. They asked their mother if they could go and play in one of the fields. There were hop fields in that area. The hops were used to make beer. And this time of year, the hops were very large. They were getting ready to, they were harvesting them. This was on a Saturday, so I'm guessing that probably most of the men that worked in the fields were out doing other things. I know Fanny's father was playing cricket at another field, so he was not at home when these events took place. So Fanny, Minnie, and Lizzie head out to a field where they're playing. They're out there just having a good time playing, and there had never in this town of, it was Hampshire, there had never been any type of criminal activity, much less a murder. So their mom felt very safe for them to be out there playing. She didn't think anything about it. And so they were out playing, having a good time, when they encounter a man. And he comes up to the girls, and he pick some blackberries with them, and the girls eat the blackberries, And then he offers Minnie and Lizzie 3 halfpence to go to buy some candy. And, well, they took the money, and they had seen him before. They'd seen him in church, so they didn't really know him, but they had seen him around before. Then the man, like I said, he was out there playing around with them, and he gave them some money. And then he asked Minnie. He said, "If I give you a halfpence, will you go for a walk with me?" Well, Fanny took the money, but she said, "No, I will not go for a walk with you." Well, the other 2 girls were going off with their money, and they looked back, and they saw Fanny pulling against him. He had a hold of her hand, and she was trying to pull away from him because she didn't want to go, and she was kind of crying a little bit, she's probably maybe saying, "Don't let me go," or something to that effect. And he ended up picking her up and carrying her off with him. The 2 younger girls, well, one of them was 8, same age as Fanny. The girls ran to Minnie's house, and they told Minnie's mother what they saw. And maybe in the retelling of the story, it got confusing. But the mother said, "Oh, everything's okay. Don't worry about it." So they didn't. And they went back to playing. They didn't go back looking for Fanny. They had their money, and they might have gone off to get sweets. I really don't know where they went, but they were still playing. And they did not see Fanny again. But I guess they thought, hey, Minnie's mom wasn't worrying. It must be okay. Maybe this is a man that is safe and he's just going for a walk. Don't really know what was going on in their mind. But they had been playing, and about 5 o'clock, they were making their way home for dinner. Now, there was one of the neighbors. Her name was Mrs. Gardner. And she noticed that Fanny was not with the girls. And she asked about it, and the 2 girls told Mrs. Gardner about the man and what happened. Now, this concerned her. She was like, "That doesn't sound good. Let's go and tell your mother." So they did. They went home to the Baker's house. Not the Bakers, I'm sorry. They went back to the Adams house, Fanny Adams' home, and to tell what had happened. So Fanny's mother and her friend, they went to go look for Fanny. They didn't find her. They could not find her anywhere. Well, they happened to meet a man named Frederick Baker. He happened to work for a solicitor. He was like kind of like a secretary to the solicitor. A solicitor is just another word for a lawyer or attorney. So they had seen him around town, and they asked him if he had seen the girl. And, of course, at this time, Minnie said, "Oh, that's the man that gave us the money." And he told them, "Well, I am in the habit of giving children money." He enjoyed giving them money so they could buy candy and that sort of thing. So she just said, Mrs. Gardner was kind of looked at him kind of strange because he was coming back from the direction where the girls had been playing. And she said, "I ought to turn you into the police." And he basically said something like, "Oh, do whatever you want." Well, she didn't, because she didn't have any reason to. But then they went on looking, and they didn't find anything, and they returned home because I thought, well, Fanny's probably still playing out in the fields, and she just isn't, maybe she found some other friends to play with, and she just lost track of time. 7 o'clock rolls around, and Fanny is still not home. So between 7 and 8 o'clock, this really started worrying Fanny's mom. Her mom's name is Harriet Adams. So she starts getting really concerned, and she gets some neighbors together to help her go look for Fanny. So they go out looking. They look in the hop garden, and one of the men one of the workmen out there, he decided to go out and look too. Well, while he was out there, he found a very disturbing sight. He saw Fanny's head, only her head, was on top of two hop poles. Those were the hops. They grow real tall. I read a book about this also, and the book said that the hop sticks were lying on the ground, so you could see the head was on the ground. The head was detached from the body. There were many cuts in the face. One of the cuts went from the corner of her mouth up to her ear, kind of like when you think of the Joker's smile. There was a cut in her cheek. They had cut different places on her face. It was almost hard to recognize who it was. They had cut off one of her ears, and to me, this part here really got to me. Both of her eyes had been removed. What kind of sick person does all of this? I just don't understand. Anyway, he lets them know about this, and they kept looking around because they knew that there were more parts of the child's body. So as he was looking around, he saw the trunk of her body. And they also found a leg. A thigh was kind of torn off of the body, but not completely separated from the trunk. The arms and legs were separated from the trunk, but like I said, one of the thighs was not. The trunk of her body was empty. This creep had taken out her heart, her lungs, her liver, and they found those, and they had cuts. Every one of those organs they found had cuts in them. It was said that they never found her intestines. Have no idea where the intestines were. And if that wasn't bad enough, this person had also cut out the lower private parts of this little girl's body. That was never found. So he completely mutilated her. There were other parts of her body that were not found. They would be found. Some things would be found later. Some things would never be found. They would never find it. Now, Harriet, of course, this is the mother. She is in deep grieving. She's in shock. She's going to run to the cricket field to let her husband know what had happened, but she falls out. She can't make it, and she asks someone to please go deliver the message. So they did. And when they got to the cricket field, the father was furious. He got home, and he got his shotgun, loaded it up, and he was going to go hunt for the killer. His friends talked him out of it and said, no, we need to let the police take care of this. You can't go out there. You don't know who it is. So they were able to talk him out of it. So as they were finding different parts of the body, it was getting dark, so they had to go back out the next day. And they found a foot, and the shoe was still on this one foot they found. They found pieces of her clothing that had been torn up or cut. Bloody pieces of clothing. As I said, they could not find many parts of the body. They found one of her eyes by the river. I don't think they found both of them. I only read where they found one eye. Then another place I read, it said that they found both eyes. So you get different information from different places that you read. So what they did was they took the pieces of the bodies of her body that they found to the Leathern pub, and they laid things out on a table. They were trying to piece all of Fanny back together. And one said they were going to sew them back together. I'm not really sure exactly what was done with all the body parts. All I know is that they took them to a place. They had the doctor went and looked. The parents, of course, were identified that, yes, this was their daughter. And people would go in there whenever they'd find something and bring it in there. Now, another man that went out the next day, he found a large rock. And on this rock, there was blood, long hair, and flesh. Well, it matched up to, of course, Fanny's hair and everything. And they are assuming this was used to kill her. And then she was dismembered later. Now, everyone's going back and they're talking about what they had seen and what was done that day. Also, they never found the breastbone of Fanny. I don't know where they were taken, what was done with them. Just brutal. The suspect that was on most people's minds was a man named Frederick Baker. And I'd mentioned him a little earlier, that the mother and her friend stopped him and asked him if he'd seen the girls. And the girl said, he gave us some money. And so he had seen the girls, but he said, oh, I left them playing out in the field. And several other people had seen Frederick in that area. He was walking back from that area, and he said things, I guess greetings to some of the people. One of the really strange things that happened was when he got back to work, because he had left work. They said he had been drinking off and on all that morning. He would leave work, go get a drink, go back. Then he was gone all of this time, quite some time, when this murder was being committed. Now, he said he was innocent. He said, I had nothing to do with this. When he got back to the job, the police came and questioned him. They questioned the man he worked with and asked him, did he seem strange? And he said, no, he came in and, did his work. He said he did say something strange, because he said, well, something to the effect that, if the police think it was me, then I might have to move. And his colleague that he worked with said, you've got a good job here at the lawyer's office. And he said, well, maybe I could go as a butcher. Now, that's really strange for someone to say, especially after what he's being accused of. So they go ahead and arrest Frederick Baker because of the evidence that they have. People had seen him. Even more damning evidence was they were looking in his desk. And he had a diary in his desk, and he would write things in this diary about daily activities. Well, for that day, he had put 24 August 1867, and this is what he wrote. killed a young girl. It was fine and hot. Okay. Why would you write something like that? They were thinking that he was talking about the weather being fine and hot. And he tried telling them that he meant to put a comma after killed, and it would have said killed a young girl, saying that he heard about it and he was just writing about it. They didn't believe him at all. A little bit of backstory on Frederick Baker. His mother died when he was young. He had a sister and his dad. His sister died of brain fever, and sometimes they called brain fever. It could have been for some psychiatric problem she had, but it also was a disease that you would have high fevers and it would kill you. The father had insanity himself. He would beat the children. He didn't care about the kids at all. He also had an uncle who'd been in a sanatorium and an insane asylum 4 different times. I believe his father had been put in an insane asylum at one point in time. And another thing that had happened to Frederick, he was engaged to be married. I would say maybe 2 years before all this took place. Well, the girl, his fiancée, broke off the marriage. She broke off the engagement, I guess you'd say, and she married someone else. Well, they said that this drove him mad, and he just started wandering around, staying at different places. They think that he might have been involved in killing a young woman, but he was never connected with it. But there was a woman that was taken off into a hayfield and was killed. He would stay in just wherever he could find a place. And from what they said, he did not come from a poor family. So it's not like he needed to be wandering around. He could have gone home and had a place to stay. But he didn't. And he had lived in a different village before this. Then he ended up in this new village that he was living in, and he got a job with a solicitor. And he'd been there, I don't know, a couple of months, maybe a little longer, but he was, everyone knew him. They thought he was just fine. He, I believe, went to church. When he lived in the other town, he was like a Sunday school teacher and all kinds of stuff. They say when you are looking for a murderer, most of the time you're going to be really surprised. They can be the most upstanding person you know. Don't know what goes on in their minds. But they did arrest Frederick Baker. He had 2 small pocket knives on him. They found some blood on the cuffs of his shirts. And they noticed that the shirt and his pants and jacket were wet. And they were asking him, how did you get wet? Because they could see a little bit of blood stain where it looked like maybe he tried washing it off. And he said, I get wet every time I go walking. Boy, that makes a lot of sense. This whole thing just disturbing. When they took him in, they had to hide him from the townspeople. They wanted to hang him right then and there. They were ready to get rid of him. They didn't care that he didn't have a trial. They just wanted him gone. Well, the sheriff got him to the jail, and it is said that while he was at the jail in town, that he slept very little, and that he shuddered at the sight of meat and wouldn't eat it. Then he was moved to a different a different prison to await trial. This happened in August. His trial was not going to happen until December the 5th. So he was taken and he was put, as I said, in another jail. And they said when he was there, he was just fine. He was talking to everybody, had a real good appetite, was just like normal. Like nothing happened. They were conducting investigations, and during that investigation, a young boy came forward in October. Okay, this is about 2 months after the murder. This young boy comes forward. His mom had held him back from going forward before. She was afraid for him to get involved. But he testified that he had seen Frederick Baker walking from the hops field, and he went to the edge of the river, and he saw him at the river's edge, and it looked like he was washing his clothes off. So right there you've got an eyewitness, because when he saw him, he said he had blood on him. His hands were bloody. He could see blood on the man. So right there you've got a prime witness who saw Frederick Baker covered in blood, trying to get rid of the evidence. They also had found 2 little knives on Baker. I'm just going to call him Baker from now on. The crazy guy, just disgusting. They found 2 little knives, and they were saying that they didn't think that those small knives would have been big enough to have done all of the cutting and things that were done to Fanny. But they did have someone take the knife apart, and the person that took the knife apart did find some blood, some small blood particles. So that was just a little bit more letting them know that yes, he did have blood on these little knives. They said he probably had another weapon, but with so many people having walked through the crime scene, that a lot of evidence was probably destroyed. People walking, there might have been a longer knife out there somewhere. So they checked it out. They checked the clothing. And back in those days, of course, they didn't have DNA. All they could tell you was whether the blood was from a human or an animal. And they decided that the blood that was found was from a human being. So that was some more evidence that he had been in contact with a human being, and the evidence is just piling up against him. The little boy's evidence, that was, I don't know, his mother just didn't want him getting involved. I guess maybe she was afraid that someone would try to hurt him. I don't know. It's hard to say. But the little boy did finally come forward and testify. So when it was time for the trial to start, on December the 5th, 1867, they had Minnie, the friend of Fanny, the one that is 8 years old, they had her get on the witness stand, and she said, yes, that was the man that gave us the money, and he was the one who was taking Fanny off. And they tried saying that she was so young, she probably misunderstood what happened and didn't see things the way she was saying. I mean, they were trying to say she was too young to testify. How ridiculous is that? But the little boy who'd seen him all bloody, that was the true proof that they probably had the right man. After all the testimony was heard, the jury deliberated for 15 minutes. When they came back, they found Baker guilty of murder, and they sentenced him to be hung. And before he was sentenced to be hung on Christmas Eve of that year. Before he was hung, he actually wrote a letter to Fanny's parents, and he confessed to them that he did commit the murder and that he was very sorry and hoped that they would forgive him. And they said, and this is what he said, if she hadn't screamed, I don't think that this would have happened. So he's blaming this little girl that he's making go with him where she doesn't want to go for him to do what he did. That's anyway, he did confess, so he got that off his chest, I guess. But he said if she hadn't screamed, he couldn't stand the screaming, and he had to get her quiet. So, I think it was 8 o'clock in the morning, December 24th of 1867, Baker was hung in front of 5,000 people. There were 5,000 people there watching. Now, I don't know about you, but this story just made me sick. But I thought I needed to tell her story. She's not here to tell her story. And this is not about this man. This is about this little girl who was unjustly killed. And we need to, we don't want to forget some of those people. I just can't imagine as a parent the feeling that would cause. Yes, I would have been just like the dad. Let me at him. I'm going to get him myself. Maybe they should have let him once they found out he really had done it. So, what did you think? Obviously, he was the killer. He said he was. They put up a headstone a few years later, and it is still there. This is a picture of the headstone that they put up for Fanny Adams. This is in Alton, at the Alton Cemetery in England. Really nice. Look at that. You can see a toy animal there. So people still remember Fanny. And I'm not going to tell this next part because it really grosses me out. But you can look up, there's a term that they use for sweet Fanny Adams, and that some of the sailors use. But I don't even want to talk about it. If you want to look it up, you can look up sweet Fanny Adams, and it'll tell you how they use the term. To me, it just was disgusting. But tell me what you thought of the story. Is this something that you like to hear? Do you like, I know I had to kind of go into a little bit more detail so you could just see what a vicious, insane man this really was. Do you think he should have been put in an insane asylum, or he deserved the death penalty? I tell you what, I don't know that he was acting all that insane when they were asking him questions, but I don't know. I wasn't there, but it's just awful. And we know we still have these kinds of things happening today. But do you have any other stories that you've heard or any that you'd like me to kind of do some research on? Because I do go back. I've read lots and lots of pages about Fanny Adams, and it you get to really know the case so well when you look these things up. But you can type in Fanny Adams and you can read about her case in a little more detail also. Um, so, anyway, I enjoyed visiting with you guys today. Let me know what you thought about Baker. I just was disgusted with the whole thing after reading it over and over several times from different sources, that someone could do something like that. And there is Ginger again. As you can see, I'll have it more done. And let me turn that sideways. Maybe it'll stop that flickering. I'm going to let you go for now. I hope you're having a lovely day. Take care of yourselves. God bless you. Stay safe out there now. Be careful what you do, where you go. Tell you what, sometimes these stories get you to thinking. I'm going to let you go. You guys take care. I love you. God bless you. Bye.